Hello, class. It's your classmate, Alvin Lewis Jones Sr. I have my wife, Dr. Caroline Jones, next to me. She has a doctorate in theology, so this should be interesting. We're going to speak to you about the artist Pietro Perugino. His title of the work is Christ Giving Keys of the Kingdom to St. Peter. It was dated 1481. The medium is fresco. The size rather large, 10 feet by 10 inches by 18 feet. It is located in the Sistine Chapel of Rome, Italy. This work was commissioned by Pope Sixtus IV to paint a cycle of frescoes for the Sistine Chapel. Little side note, the Sistine Chapel is named for Pope Sixtus, as 16 is part of his name. This particular fresco tells the story of Petrine authority, which Pope Sixtus wanted to use to convey that Christ giving the keys of the kingdom to heaven to St. Peter, which was meant to show the Catholic apostolic succession from Christ to Peter and then to the popes. This is important as Christ and Peter are the central figures in this painting, with the key hanging down vertically along the point that takes your eye to the back temple, which is the vanishing point when we get to the back door. Can you explain to them a little bit about this temple?
Well, it seems to me that considering the fact that Christ is now delivering this key to Peter, and it has been stated that Peter will be the rock in which the church will be built on, and the far background appears to be a church, so I would say that it would be the future church that will be built by Peter.
And you notice all the beautiful gold relief on it. It's octagonal shape with two large arches on the side of it. Beautiful, isn't it?
It is beautiful.
And I love the way your eye is drawn to it directly from the center of Christ and St. Peter, and it leads you all the way to the back.
It would make sense that it would be placed there. Even though it's in the back, we're drawn to it because that is the future of what is being said here. So it makes sense that it would be right in the center, far enough away for us to know that this is coming in the future, but still prominent enough for us to know that it is happening now.
And another cool thing in the back of this picture, because here Perugino's use of perspective is just beautiful in this image. If you look on the left and right sides in the very back, there are these beautiful arches all the way in the back. And on the left side arch, they have writing on both of these arches. And on the one on the very left, it says, "You have sanctified this great temple." And when you look at the one on the right, it says, "Before the people differ in religion." And these arches are built in the style of Constantine. And what do we know about Constantine from a religious perspective?
Well, we would know that he is the reason why Christianity became the prominent religion, because of his acceptance of Christianity.
And that was strange coming from Romans, because Romans dealt with gods and they had multitude of gods. He narrowed it down to the one God and made it almost in essence legal for Christianity to exist.
That would be correct.
So by placing those arches in the background, that is not a mistake. That is done deliberately, because they are again tying this theme home of the church being built up from Christ giving the keys to Peter and working its way through the historic nature of that.
It's definitely deliberate because, as I mentioned before, the church being in the background but also so prominent enough that we can see that it's happening now, it has to set the stage for what's going to happen later, as we now see that we have popes, a succession of popes that has come along. It would stand to reason that as Christ is given the keys to the church or to heaven to Peter, that would also follow, that Peter would also give the keys to the church to the next priest, to the next priest, to the next priest, so on and so forth, as we have our popes today.
And if you look at the figures in the middle, they are super tiny, but there's some relevant stuff that's happening. If we were to go over to the left side, you see the scene with that's where you see the bulk of those figures. There is a figure of Christ standing there, and he's doing something with someone. Can you describe what you see?
Well, it looks as though he is giving or handing money. As I've done my research on this particular piece, it looks like he is paying his taxes on the left-hand side.
And if you go from the middle to the right, you see two scenes of Christ with another bunch of people, but it's not as simple as that scene. What's happening to Christ in those scenes?
Well, it looks like there is a stoning going on here. What I love about the contrast of these two scenes is that you see two different things happening at one point in this whole entire painting, but there are two different scenes happening at two different times. On the one hand, we see Christ delivering his taxes to the Romans because of a scene that he had with Matthew that said, "Give unto Caesar what is owed unto Caesar, which is taxes." And on the other side, we see a stoning going on because we know that Christ did not always comply with what religious figures thought to be truth, and so he is being stoned in this scene because of blasphemy. I like this scene because it shows a contrast between the two. On the one hand, he's very compliant, and on the other hand, he's not so much. So I really love what they did here in the contrast and showing the two different sides of Christ, one being compliant and one going against the grain, and also angering the religious figures so that he would be in a position to be stoned.
And if you notice, they almost split symmetrical, left and right, to give you those scenes. Now, if we come all the way up to the front, which we save for last, because this is the part of the image that is just amazing. Here you see Christ giving the keys to Peter, but all the other apostles are there with him. And you'd have to zoom in because they all have these light halos on top of their heads.
Yes.
But when you look at the front section, it's not just Christ and the apostles. There are other figures there. And the ones that are very intriguing are the ones on the far right. What did we notice about the two figures on the far right?
Well, what I did notice about the two figures on the far right is that they had something in their hands, and I was very curious about what's in their hands. One of them is holding what looks like
A square ruler.
Yes, and the other one looks like he's holding
A compass.
which to me indicates that this could be some kind of architectural thing going on here, as we are talking about a future church. So this indicates that a church is going to be built, as they look like building materials. And that's what I took from this, that these are individuals who are contemplating the building of this church.
And then on the left side, they are much more contemplative and you know, I don't even know the term I want to use, but very reserved. But there is one figure who we looked at, and we believe that that figure is who?
I believe that that's the figure of Judas. I say that because of what appears to be a money pouch, and his hand seems to be inside, as in protecting of the money. But what I noticed about that figure is that all the rest of the figures there seem to be painted in such a light way. But this particular figure, which I believe is Judas, is in my opinion painted darkly. He looks like a dark figure. He looks like a sinister figure, which is what made me believe that it was Judas in the first place.
And we would like to say that this image is done in the classic Renaissance style. And when you see that Renaissance style art, you see that it's going to get away from the medieval era with all the abstractness. We're going to get more into this kind of realism, if you will, with idealized stories from classical religion, some contemporary life sittings going on. But it's in the way the painting is pictured. It is very smooth brushstrokes. You can see the faces. The faces help tell this story. The lines of perspective draw you to the temple in the back, the grid pattern that he laid down. It just gives you all those classic things that help tie this image in. And we'd even go to the very back where you see the beautiful blue sky that starts from the ground up. It's a light blue, then it turns into a dark blue with clouds. There are mountains in the background, there are hills on the left and right. It is just an impressive painting to have been done in the 1400s. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, this is actually a very bright painting, but there's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on in this painting, and when I first looked at it, I really wasn't captivated by it at all until I started to really look at the fine details. Now I see all the fine details, and I see the story that's being told from this one particular painting. It is very light in the way it looks. The color is very bright. The scenery is very active. So I'm very impressed with this painting.
And that is what we have for you for our Module 6 presentation. We'd like to thank you and say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.